Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Captioned Life, a podcast about how comics and pop culture impact life and society, and vice versa. Coming to you from deep in the heart of Texas, I'm Kevin.
And from Indianapolis, I am Sean. Before we get started with this episode, please hit that subscribe button on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on, and follow us on social media under the username @CaptionedLife. You can also find out more information and past episodes at thecaptionedlife.com.
That's right. Hey, we are smack dab in the middle of the summer, which also means that's the middle of the summer blockbuster season. There's been some great movies, some big summer movies come out this summer. The movies are back, to say the least, because we've had some really, really big releases, and some more so, some surprises, some things that kind of leave you guessing. But like overall, movies are back. So right now, Top Gun Maverick is the number one movie in the country. Or we're recording this in late June, but Top Gun Maverick has had a successful run, just crossed the $1 billion mark. We've also had a big Marvel movie with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. An excellent, I thought it was great, Jurassic Park or Jurassic World Dominion. A lot of fan service in that one, but a good way to wrap it up. And a little bit of a failure to launch with Mr. Buzz Lightyear. So
was it? I mean, it's doing okay, just not as well.
No, it's not breaking any records. It's not doing. Right. It's not doing the business that everybody was hoping for.
Right. Yeah. Which, I mean, it's got some controversies with other countries and stuff like that. But yeah, it didn't hit the mark that people were expecting. So
right. Well, all of this and our shared love for movies has led us to revisit a topic that we have, a show format that we've done before, where we look back at the things of our past and we decide, was it great or were we 8? And we are going to look back at summer blockbusters today, specifically the summer blockbusters or the movies of 1991. Yes. Because I turned 8 in 1990 and Sean turned 8 in 1992. So we split the difference. And that's where we're going to go with our favorite movies from that year and talk about, do they stand the test of time, or were we just really happy to get to go to a movie theater? Yes. So Sean, why don't you set the stage? What is going on in 1991 to prepare us for this trek down memory lane?
Yeah, so here are some of the things that happened in the year 1991, just to kind of give you some cultural context when these movies came out. So some world events that happened in 1991, Gulf War begun. But then at the end of 1991, the end of Cold War and Soviet Union dissolves as well, too. So for a while, the United States were in two wars at once. But by the end of 1991, the Cold War had ended. Events that happened in the U.S., the case of Rodney King that was, excuse me, if you don't know, let me start that over again because I coughed and messed up my place here. So, okay. In terms of U.S. events, some things that happened was the beating of Rodney King in L.A. that ended up going to court, I think, the next year, and the 4 officers that were involved were found not guilty, and so that caused the L.A. riots that happened, I think, in 1992, but the event itself happened in 1991. The Supreme Court Judge Thurgood Marshall retires. And then he is replaced by Clarence Thomas, who is still on the court, as we know.
Can I just say that Clarence Thomas isn't standing the test of time? Was it great or were we 8?
Yeah. Well,
we were 8.
And you know what's interesting is when he was being vetted as well, he was being accused of sexual assault as well too, from a former aide that he had as well too. So yeah. So yeah,
we can edit that part out. My light fell on me in the middle of it anyway.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. That's fine.
Good. Continue.
Yeah. Then we also had Jeffrey Dahmer, who is the infamous serial killer, arrested this year as well, too. 1991 was also a big year for sports. So this was the year that the Pittsburgh Penguins won their first Stanley Cup ever. And I don't know if you remember this or were aware of this, Kevin, but this was when Mario Lemieux and Jaromir Jagr was on the Pittsburgh Penguins, and they set the stage for pretty much making that franchise successful. So this is the first time they got Stanley Cup. It was also the year that the Chicago Bulls got their first NBA championship with Michael Jordan. Magic Johnson announces that he had HIV and retired from the NBA, and this was also the year that the U.S. Women's Soccer won their first ever World Cup against Norway. In terms of gaming for 1991, Sonic the Hedgehog was released in the U.S. and it sold 1 million copies in the U.S. and 2 million worldwide. It was also the year Super Nintendo was released in the U.S., which I remember getting that Super Nintendo that year. So
I have vivid memories of all of those things, like, come to think of it. Just because I was kind of starting in on like sports fandom during that time. So I remember Super Mario, and I remember Mario. I remember the Pittsburgh Penguins, and I definitely remember the Chicago Bulls. I mean, Michael Jordan was the reason why I liked basketball at the time. He was the reason why every kid liked basketball at the time.
Yep.
And if you say that he wasn't, you're lying to yourself, because nobody was out there like, I want to grow up to be Isaiah Thomas.
Hey, I was saying I wanted to be Rick Smits, but I'm also a tall white dude like him. So
yeah. Well, he played on the Pacers too, so that makes sense for you.
Yeah, but I mean, no, everybody wanted to be everybody idolized Michael Jordan. Yeah, I mean, everybody did. I mean, I love watching him play. I was excited when he made his return to the NBA. They kept guessing like when he was going to come back, and his first game back from his retirement in the NBA was actually against the Indiana Pacers. So we were really excited about that.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
and then I definitely remember Sonic the Hedgehog, and I definitely remember Super Nintendo. Here is the one time where being a child of divorce has like paid off for me, is that at one parent's house I had a Sega Genesis with Sonic the Hedgehog on it, and at the other parent's house I had a Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
And so that's like the only positive I can say that ever came from being a child of divorce.
Right. And then the last thing in 1991 in regards to music, Nirvana released their best-selling album Nevermind in this year, and this was also the year that the lead singer of Queen, Freddie Mercury, announced that he had AIDS and then died the very next day. So those were the things that happened in 1991. So let's get right into the movies.
Let's talk about movies.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you that when I was looking into this, and I looked up a list, and we kind of batted some things back and forth, decided on who was going to talk about what. We originally talked about 1990, and I looked at the box office for 1990, and just nothing stood out to me. But as I kind of like looked around the early 90s, it was kind of a crapshoot for what you were going to get. I'll go back in time a little bit just to clarify what I'm talking about. 1989, classic year for blockbuster films. You had Batman, you had Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Back to the Future 2, Ghostbusters 2, and two of my personal favorites are very underrated: Turner and Hooch and The Abyss. The Abyss was a game changer, and it kind of flew under the radar because James Cameron tested out a lot of the camera techniques in the filmmaking techniques that he would use to make other bigger, more successful films. But The Abyss is still really great. You get to 1990, you don't have as many like popcorn kind of flicks, suitable for all ages flicks. Some of the top movies in 1990 were Ghost, Pretty Woman, Total Recall, Hunt for the Red October, and Die Hard 2. Okay. So 1990, if it's not for the Ninja Turtles and Kevin McAllister and Home Alone, you would not have had a lot of like all ages films.
Right.
We're going to talk a lot about 1991. 1992 is a little bit better. Batman Returns, Sister Act, Home Alone 2, which we've talked about on this before. I prefer Home Alone 2 than 1. And then A League of Their Own. And then back to 93, or on to 93, you're back to almost all made for grown-ups movies, with outside of number one, which was Jurassic Park. You had The Firm, The Fugitive, Sleepless in Seattle, In the Line of Fire, Cliffhanger, and A Few Good Men. Okay. This I guess stands in very sharp contrast to what we have now, where most of those movies from that time period would not get a heavily backed wide release today, because most of them, the studios wouldn't believe they would make money. It's very, very rare that you have, especially R-rated cinema, that is super successful, because you cut your audience in half. And then for me personally, like, and I kind of realized this in looking back on it. 1996 is the year.
Wait, so are you going through the entire decade?
No. I'm just telling you that for me, 1996 was the year that defined blockbuster cinema and kind of shifted how we look at what is going to be a big tentpole release for the summer. In 1996, all of the top 4 movies in 1996 came out during the summer. Independence Day was number 1.
Right.
Twister was number 2. Mission Impossible was number 3, and then The Rock was number 4.
Right.
So you had like a cultural shift of what that would become what we expect now, which is franchise pictures, superhero movies, and Disney Pixar animated features. And so like looking back at the early 90s, specifically for this, like 1991, it was an interesting like trip down memory lane, because the more I looked at this year specifically, and I'm glad that we decided to like split the difference, I remember going to the movies to see these films that we're going to talk about. And so like it was a big thing for me. I know that we're gonna touch on, I guess, the top 10 overall at the end of our discussion. But do you want to, before we get started with our picks, the ones that we remember most fondly, do you want to talk about some of our honorable mentions?
Yeah. So just as Kevin said, we talked a little bit ahead of time of what our picks were in terms of our top 3 for each one. And so there was a lot of movies that came out in 1991 that were really good. And it was really hard for us to whittle down to just 3 each. So we wanted to take a moment to recognize some of the other movies that we thought were really great and just didn't make it on our list, but we wanted to at least mention them here just for the sake of going down, nostalgic lane and remembering some of these movies. So this was the year that The Addams Family came out. This was also Ernest Scared Stupid, which I absolutely loved that movie as a kid. We always watched it around Halloween, right? Did you do the same thing?
No. I don't think that I ever watched Ernest Scared Stupid.
Okay.
I have seen some of the Ernest movies, but specifically like The Addams Family. I it was a TV show, right? So this was a remake or an update of the TV show, and I'd never seen the TV show, but I loved the movies. And like looking back on it, I remember Christopher Lloyd as Uncle Fester,
right?
And Christopher Lloyd was a huge freaking movie star between 1985 and like 1992.
Oh yeah. He has an impressive resume. Back
to the Future, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and then The Addams Family. Like he was just like hit after hit after hit.
Right. Yeah. The Addams Family is where Christina Ricci, I think, had her breakout role. And I remember having a huge crush on her when I saw her in Addams Family. So
yeah.
Naked Gun. That. Yeah. Naked Gun 2.5, The Smell of Fear. So that is the sequel to The Naked Gun that starred Leslie Nielsen. Leslie Nielsen. And then Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country, which was the 6th and final film for the cast of the original series in the movie franchise that they had, which was a really good one as well, too. City Slickers, which starred Billy Crystal, Daniel Stern, and I can't remember.
John Lovett. No,
he was in the second one.
Oh.
Yeah, he didn't show up in the first one. He showed up in the second one. Yeah. Right. I can't remember. I mean, that the third person that was in there, like that's the only time I've ever seen him in anything with City Slickers. So I can't remember.
I bet you it's Ruben Blades.
That might be who it is. Yeah.
That's it. And then Jack Palance,
Jack Palance was in it. Yes.
Yeah.
In both.
Yeah. Even though he died in the first one, which is crazy how they rewrote it. But
makes sense. Yeah.
I remember that really being my first exposure to like adult comedy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like comedy made for grown-ups.
Yeah.
And there's still some slapstick moments in there, but like there's a like, I guess you get exposed to these things a little bit at a time, like who Robin Williams is outside of being the genie, who Billy Crystal is outside of, Mike Wazowski and things like that.
Mhm.
So these characters, these actors and comedians that I've idolized my entire life, this was one of the first things that I remember of Billy Crystal. And then of course, as I got a little bit older, I went back and watched some of the things that he was in from the 80s.
Right. Yeah. And then the last movie we had on the list as an honorable mention was The Last Boy Scout.
Yeah. And that was one that I didn't see until much later, but it still holds up as one of my favorite like buddy cop movies. We skipped one on the list, Beauty and the Beast.
Oh, yep, we did. Yes. Beauty and the Beast, which is a huge one for Disney because this was the first animated film to get nominated for Best Picture for the Oscars, but did win Best Picture for the Golden Globes.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to know what I remember most about going to see Beauty and the Beast?
What's that?
It was like high art. Like it was like a spectacle, and it was the first movie I ever remember going to see at night. Like my parents wanted to see it enough that they were going to not like pay the cheaper matinee price that we went to see it at night.
Yeah. Yeah. The scene where they're doing the titular song Beauty and the Beast, that scene had a lot of really great animation because of all the effects that they had in there with like the lighting and stuff like that. That's what really, made it stand out from the other animations because it looked almost lifelike in terms of how they, how it was drawn and everything.
Yeah, so. a lot of the sets were computer generated for the first time.
Right. Yeah, they spent a lot of time and money into using those. And what's interesting is that the person who wrote Beauty and the Beast actually, that wrote the music for Beauty and the Beast, if I remember correctly, he was a graduate of Indiana University. And I think he ended up dying before they found out about the awards and stuff like that. So,
Alan Menken.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a great documentary on him in
Disney Plus.
On Disney Plus.
Yep. So,
yeah, man, it was, it was like right there on the. Disney had a really, really hot run with Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and then The Lion King. A lot of the people that are our age refer to that as the golden age of Disney animation. But
oh yeah, well, because that was like the breakout because they haven't really made a like blockbuster animated film, I think, since the late 60s or maybe early 70s. So there was like a long gap where they didn't really make any blockbuster animated movies for a while. So
yeah, they had a very long they had a dry run in the 80s especially. Yeah, I'm sorry, Howard Ashman is the musical composer. Alan Menken also worked on this, but I was thinking of Howard Ashman.
It is Howard. Yeah. I should have known that because because of him being an IU graduate. Yeah. So that's right. Yeah. When you say Alan Menken, I was like, it's
Alan. I wasn't wrong, but that was the other guy. Alan Menken is the composer. Howard Ashman is the lyricist.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So I don't want to get anybody in the message boards. So you know what? I'll go first and talk about my first. Was it great? But were we ate? Picture, and it's a love it or you hate it one, and that is Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. And I remember growing up in Brazoria County, there was a theater in Lake Jackson, Texas, called the Lake Theater, and it used to be like an actual theater where like they would do stage shows and whatnot, but at some point when that became less popular, they converted it into a movie theater. So it was super kind of old school. Is definitely like the theater you remember as a kid with like the marquee that they had to put like the individual letters up on, like now showing and stuff like that. But I remember going to see that movie as a kid and absolutely loving it. Because of the swashbuckling adventure. Now, like looking back on it, when I was almost 9, when I saw this, it didn't bother me that Kevin Costner didn't have a British accent. And
Well, when you're a kid, you're not paying attention to
No,
those
you're
things.
not. You're not. Yeah. And I absolutely loved Alan Rickman as the sheriff of Nottingham.
Mm-hmm.
High point of the movie.
Yep. Yeah. This. Go ahead.
No, there were so much of the action set pieces between like the way that they robbed people in Sherwood Forest, to the launching of the Azim and Robin Hood over the wall, and he's like, F me, he cleared it. That was like the first time I'd heard a F word in a movie. But like every single one of those characters, I love those characters, like Will Scarlet and Azim, and like it's, to me, like I will not stand for somebody besmirching that one.
Yeah. Well, this movie was really interesting. First of all, when I was a kid, I loved this movie as well too. And I actually remember vividly, I think I either got it for my birthday or for Christmas. I got the Nerf version of the archery set that came that was themed, the Robin Hood Prince of Thieves. I remember having it out in the garage and like shooting at targets and stuff. And I thought it was like so fantastic and so cool that it felt like Robin Hood. And what I thought was interesting about this movie overall is that this is one of the few times we don't see a Prince John in the movie. And it introduces Hazim, which I don't think has ever been introduced before. And now that tends to be almost like a staple character in some of the later Robin Hood movies that we see as well, too. So I thought that was really interesting. And I'm not sure like where that idea came from. But, if you know the story of Robin Hood, like the legend and everything like that, I think it's really interesting thinking of that approach of adding a new character to the legend, because looking back at the history of it, the legend of Robin Hood was actually a separate story than Maid Marian and Friar Tuck, who were legends that were kind of connected to Robin Hood, but they were like separate, and they were only really heard of in France at the time. And so as the legend evolved, they actually just combined those stories. And so originally there wasn't a Maid Marian or Friar Tuck and the actual historical person, but those legends got combined together. So I thought it was interesting that now we have Hazim in Robin Hood Prince of Thieves, and that tends to be a character that shows up in later movies now.
Yeah. Do you remember who played King Richard at the end of that movie?
Sean Connery.
Yeah. such a great cameo.
Yes. Well, then the odd, I got to give Maid Marian a kiss, which, and Robin Hood Men in Tights, they spoofed that by having Patrick Stewart make out with Maid Marian in that one.
And speaking of Men in Tights, also a classic film, Aziz, as he's called, in that movie, because did you say a sneeze? Was Dave Chappelle like the first on-screen Dave Chappelle that we got? So if I were going to say, was it great or were we 8? I'm probably, if I watched it today, there'd be some things that we were like don't hold up as much, but like, the first person perspective arrow shots and things like that, man, it was a game changer. So how could you not say it was great?
Oh, the cinematography in that movie was fantastic. Like you got some great shots of, when they were building the fortress and in the forest, there were some really great visuals with the arrow spinning around and things like that. Like there was a lot of stuff that was just really groundbreaking. I don't want to say groundbreaking, but was definitely visually appealing. That was very different than what you've seen before. Yeah. I think just, launched the idea of having Robin Hood movies as a popular movie again, because I don't think we had anything since the animated version that was, as successful as this one was. And I think it's a lot of it has to do with the story.
Even the animated one was a flop, going back to what we talked about with Disney. Like it was like, we all remember it fondly, but it wasn't successful when it came out.
Right. Yeah. So what I was saying earlier was that, well, I can't remember what I was saying earlier, so never mind.
No, but you were right though. It changed. It added a new layer to films of that type through technology and stuff that we hadn't had before.
Right. Yep.
All right. What's the first on your list, buddy?
So for me, in 1991, one of my top 3 movies is the movie Hook which is about Peter Pan who's grown up. It was directed by Steven Spielberg, and the cast consists of Dustin Hoffman as Captain Hook, Robin Williams as Peter Pan, Julia Roberts as Tinkerbell, and Bob Hoskins as Smee. And this was just a fantastic movie overall because of the visuals, the new story, and the twist that they add on to this that we haven't really heard or watched before. And so this was a Peter Pan film, but with new characters and new adventures and things like that as well too. So as I was looking up the history behind Hook and some of the things that happened with the movie, here's a few things that I learned from my research that I thought would be really interesting that I want to share with you and our audience here. So
okay.
Apparently, this film was where Robin Williams and Steven Spielberg met for the first time, and they became really good friends after this. And what was interesting about this is that I guess Steven Spielberg was actually really disappointed in how the movie came out because it wasn't what he wanted necessarily. But after Robin Williams passed away, he wanted to rewatch the movie, but apparently he couldn't because in the middle of the movie he just cried for hours, because of him grieving for Robin Williams. But afterwards, he said that he was actually thankful for the movie because that's actually how they met. So even though he was disappointed how it came out, he's actually really happy with it now. So that's how they met and became really good friends. Apparently, Julia Roberts was actually really difficult on set for this movie. Have you heard about that at all?
I have not.
So apparently the name that they gave her on set was Tinker Hell.
Oh,
yeah. And apparently, and I kind of get this because apparently a lot of her scenes, like she was actually on her own. Like she didn't act with a lot of people because she was, doing a lot of stuff on green screen because they had to shrink her down and all that. So I guess, she just had a hard time in that kind of solitude working environment. But she did get nominated for a Razzie Award for Worst Supporting Actress. But what I found really interesting about her involvement with this movie is that she actually almost put the production in jeopardy because she was supposed to get married to Kiefer Sutherland. And apparently, they called it off or something like that. And she fled California and went to Ireland to avoid the press. And Spielberg actually threatened to fire her if she didn't return. But I found it interesting that her life kind of sounds like Runaway Bride that she was in later on, right? So I wonder if that's where they got the inspiration from. So.
Yeah, and Notting Hill as well. Like that's her character in Notting Hill. So,
yeah. Did you know that Carrie Fisher was involved in this film too?
No.
Yeah, so apparently she actually was involved with a lot of the writing, or at least rewriting. She didn't get credit for it, but she was asked to kind of help write and edit the final script, and a lot of it was Tinkerbell lines. But she was actually in the movie very briefly. She played one of the two people who were a couple on the bridge that when Tinkerbell flew by and the fairy dust fell on them, they started floating away. She was one of those people. And apparently it was in their credit as kissing couple. And the other person was George Lucas. Yeah. So.
I do remember Phil Collins played the inspector.
Yes.
At the beginning of the movie because I was a big Phil Collins and Genesis fan. And so he had this brief cameo in the movie and it was way bigger deal to me than it was to anybody else.
Yes, I remember that briefly, but I mean,
yeah, I hold on.
It wasn't a highlight for me though. So
no, I hold on to that little bit of closely guarded Phil Collins trivia with everything I've got.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna tell you what I'm gonna do with my next one. I'm gonna give you my number one, my most revered 1991 movie, and then when we come back around to me, I want to talk about two movies that are very closely related and what they mean for cinema history. But the next one that I wanted to share, and I'm probably sure you love it too, and that is The Rocketeer.
Yes.
The Rocketeer was instant classic gold for me. Because this is around the time that I had discovered comics and superheroes. And the idea of this average Joe pilot guy finding this rocket suit just seemed like the funnest thing in the world. Everybody wanted a rocket suit like that. And I'm fairly certain that the way they produced this movie was like, who knows if this is going to be a hit? They didn't put a lot of like budget behind it.
Right.
And Disney has plans to update it. But the characters are all very like, what's the word I'm looking for? They're very colorful. Like Billy Campbell's got the boyish charm down. Right. Timothy Dalton as the villain is coming off of playing Bond twice and just chews up the scenery and his Nazi, like the Nazi film star that he's playing. And then Jennifer Connelly. Oh my goodness. This movie came out 30 years ago. And if you've seen Top Gun Maverick, she doesn't look like she's aged a day.
Yep. Agreed.
And classic 1930s, 1940s pinup beauty. But they gave her, substance. She's not just the damsel in distress. And so like the whole thing is great. And it's got some pedigree to it because Joe Johnson directed it. He had previously directed Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. He would go on to direct Jurassic Park 3, and then later on he would direct Captain America: The First Avenger for Marvel. So he's been around a lot. He does some great work. But the Rocketeer, I mean, I have the Rocketeer. I actually had some of the Robin Hood action figures when I was a kid. Yeah, but I still to this day
me too.
Have, the Rocketeer up on my wall. And interesting enough, I don't know if you knew this, Sean. The Rocketeer seems like it's been around forever because it's this 1930s like pulp comic book hero, right?
Right.
He wasn't created until the 80s.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. And since
it was a comic first, though.
Yeah. Since I rewatched it on Disney Plus, I went back and I bought some of the trades, the original Dave Stewart trades for the Rocketeer.
Right. Yeah.
Good stuff. I mean, classic kind of like, swashbuckling adventure stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I remember watching that movie as a kid. And I think what was so great about the Rocketeer is that it didn't have any like real huge following before the movie, at least not in pop culture. And that it just did so well in the movie theaters that it was just such a cool idea and like a really great story that they told with it. And for me personally, one of the things I remember growing up, in addition to watching The Rocketeer and loving that movie, is that growing up, we went to Disney World, and Disney World at that time had a area. I forget which park it was in. It was probably Magic Kingdom or Epcot or one of those two, but they had an area called Toontown. And they had, little sets from different movies that they had. And part of it was having that Bulldog restaurant that they had in Toontown. I remember going by that and loving it and thought it was so cool that I thought that we were actually at the place where Rocketeer took place, because when you're a kid, you don't realize that these are sets and these are like all made up and all that. But when you see it like in real life, you think you're actually at the place where the movie happened, So, yeah.
Right. And I think the thing that you mentioned about it not being as well known, I think that was like Disney purchased the film rights from Dave Stevens. I said Dave Stewart earlier. Dave Stevens, who created the character and wrote and illustrated the comics in the 80s, like hoping that they could catch lightning in a bottle. And the movie was successful. It just wasn't successful enough to start a franchise like they were hoping.
Right.
And he's a great character. Cliff Secord, the Rocketeer, it was a great film. And whenever they decide to revisit it, I look forward to it.
Yeah. All right. So the next movie on my list, and this is probably my favorite of all of them in 1991, is the sequel to the movie that came out the year prior, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2: Secret of the Ooze.
That's correct.
Yes,
and that's to me, it's also one of the great sequels of all time. Stands up as good as the original.
Yes. So this this had a brand new April O'Neil. So this is a different one from the original one, Paige Turco. And a lot of other people that is in the cast are not as well known, except for Ernie Reyes Jr., who we also know, played one of the characters in Surf Ninjas. That's also a cult classic. And then Kevin Nash, who's really well known as a wrestler, he actually played Super Shredder in this movie. So I thought that was really interesting. And so here's some like quick facts that I came across about the movie as I was researching this. So apparently the character Keno was created specifically for Ernie Reyes Jr. So he wasn't a character from the comics, and it's still not a character from the comics. They never wrote him like in like retroactively like what DC did for Harley Quinn. So he has only shown up in this movie, and that's the only place that you'll find him at. But I guess he was actually Donatello's fight double in the original movie, and the producer liked him so much that they wrote a character for him to be in the character or to be in the movie to replace Casey Jones, which apparently what I also found interesting about this movie and actually found interesting about the franchise as well, too, is that I guess when Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles came out in 1990, the first movie, a lot of parents apparently thought that it was really dark and violent for kids. So apparently for this second movie, which I gotta say, I find interesting because I actually texted my parents earlier today to ask them, did they think that the movie was too violent for me growing up? And my mom's like, no, why? So I thought it was really interesting, but that
surprises me to hear that too.
Yeah. So I don't know what it was about that, but apparently they replaced Casey Jones because he was really violent in the original movie, as some parents thought he was. The fighting was toned down significantly in this second movie because of that. So when you watch the sequel, they don't use their weapons for most of the film. Like they use it every once in a while, but they actually don't use their weapons. It's just hand-to-hand combat for the most part. And because of that, they also had their fight scenes with just pretty much a one and done hit when they fought the Foot Clan. So anytime you watch them, they would just either punch or kick a Foot Clan soldier, and they would go down immediately because they were trying to tone down the violent aspect that people were complaining about at that time. So I found that really interesting.
It surprises me to hear that because I don't remember the controversy. Like, I don't remember it being overly violent, but I do kind of remember like a few years earlier when Masters of the Universe came out, that they had to specify that like the soldiers that fought for Skeletor in that movie were androids because He-Man is shooting them with a laser gun, and they're like, if he's murdering all these people with this laser gun, like that's ultraviolet. So let's make them robots so that they're he's not killing people.
Right. But people were fine with Star Wars when it came out. Yeah. So, and then another really interesting thing about this movie is that apparently the Ninja Turtle creators, Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, did not want Shredder to be in this movie. Apparently what was happening was that the producer wanted this movie to be very much like the cartoon show, which makes sense because that's what, made the franchise really popular. Not that the comics weren't popular, but, when it became a cartoon show, it just became popular, for a lot more kids and a lot more families. And so the producers wanted to be more like the cartoon show, and the creators actually wanted to get away from it and try to get more to be bringing things in from the comics. So they wanted to bring in like Baxter and the Mousers and stuff like that, but the producers ultimately won out, and they decided to bring Shredder back into the second movie. So, but I thought that was interesting that they didn't want Shredder in the second movie, and they wanted to like bring in other characters from the comics. I guess they also talked about bringing in Rat King at one point.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember kind of being afraid of Toka and Razor.
I loved them. I thought they were great.
They were kind of scary.
Yeah.
But like as I get older, I realized that they were just like Muppets, like they were, you know what I mean? Like, and so like all of that stuff sits differently with me now. Maybe it was you that shared it online recently, but maybe I saw it on Reddit. Have you seen the explanation for why the Ninja Turtles have the weapons that they have?
You mean like why they have like the size and the nunchucks and all that?
Yeah. So like I
I used to
remember.
know this. I remember coming
So I
across
can't
this one
remember where
time.
I saw it recently, but okay. So
Yeah.
Raphael is the most hot-headed, so he uses the sai, which is a mostly defensive weapon,
Hmm.
and that Michelangelo is the clown and whatnot. So he Master Splinter gave him the nunchucks because it forces you to focus because the nunchucks are famous for hurting the person who's wielding them.
Okay,
Um,
gotcha.
yeah, and that Donatello was the genius,
Hmm.
and having to fight with just the wooden stick would give him humility.
Hmm.
And then Leonardo is the one that carries the swords. He's the most he's the leader, the most level-headed, and the sword being as dangerous as it is, if he would ever have to like take a life, they wanted Leonardo to be the one that could manage it.
Right.
Looking back on it, it was a very interesting explanation. I don't know if it's real, it's just a fan theory, but like it totally checks out to me.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting. So a couple of things real quick is what's interesting is that everyone, and I said the same thing. Everyone said that Leonardo had katanas, but I guess technically he didn't have katanas. What he had was called ninjados. And that katana was actually a very specific stylized type of sword that he never actually had in the comics. But I guess, katana was something that's a little bit more familiar and easier to say. So I'm sure that's probably why they just called it that. But you had talked about how the two villains in there that we just talked about that
Toka and Razor.
Thank you, Toka and Razor. Were just looked like they were puppets and all that.
Mm-hmm.
All the Ninja Turtles costuming actually came from Jim Henson's costume shop, and so I thought that was a really cool connection that they had in there of Jim Henson. I mean, I guess this film was actually dedicated to Jim Henson because he had died the year before. So, yeah. But yeah, I mean, this is one of my favorite movies growing up, and absolutely love the Ninja Turtles. I mean, they're one of the franchises that I really got into when I was a kid, and absolutely looked up to them and loved everything about Ninja Turtles. And so this was definitely my number one movie for 1991.
Can you do the ninja rap?
I did at one point, and I think that time has passed.
Go ninja, go ninja, go.
Yep.
Go ninja, go ninja.
And
go.
everybody played that song on the Discman, the Walkman with the anti-skip button on there. Yeah.
Anti-skip. All right. Okay, so my third one is not one movie, it's two movies. And it's an interesting like time capsule for American cinema that happened 30 plus years ago. But do you realize that on consecutive weekends in July of 1991, I want to say it's the 12th, on the 12th of July 1991, Point Break came out. And the following weekend, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey came out. So two super important Keanu Reeves films that came out within consecutive weeks, which by today's standards seems crazy that you'd have a movie star in a movie 2 weekends in a row. But launched, like, I mean, he was already a movie star, but like seriously, like launched him into the career that he's had now for 30 plus years. And it's ebbed and flowed, for Point Break and then Speed. You've got, some of the things that weren't so great. And then of course here recently, the John Wick franchise, but 1991 gave us the Keanu Reeves that we know and love. And looking back on it, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, like at the time, I thought it was great. It's not super good. I watched it a few years ago because Madden fell in love with Bill and Ted. And there's two instances in that movie where Keanu Reeves himself uses a very derogatory F word that because of the times was thrown around a lot differently than would be acceptable today.
Right. Yeah.
And then Point Break is cheesy, but it's directed by Catherine Bigelow, who would go on to win an Oscar for what's the bomb movie? I should know this.
You said the Bond movie, Goldeneye?
The bomb movie, the movie where Jeremy Renner plays a bomb disposal.
Hurt Locker.
Hurt Locker. Yeah, that's what it is. The Hurt Locker. And then Zero Dark 30 was a big hit for her after that.
Right.
So like it's got its, I mean, and it established Keanu Reeves as a superstar. It established Patrick Swayze, he was already a heartthrob, but he spent most of that movie shirtless, and it just solidified his stance there with the blonde hair and the beard and everything. And the extreme sports. I mean, come on, the 90s were like the extreme sports, like prime time, and Tony Hawk was for skateboarding. Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze were for surfing and skydiving. So it's part of the pop cultural like echelon from back then. And I just think it was interesting that those two movies came out 2 weekends in a row.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. I don't think you hear about that very often. I mean, it still happens, but not very often. So
yeah. I mean, Chris Pratt is going to have a movie that came out in June, and he's part of a movie that's coming out next month. Right. Or I guess by the time this airs in July, and that's maybe the closest that we get to it. But the thing is, he's not carrying either one of those films either.
Right.
So
yeah. All right. So my last movie this is a very nostalgic movie for me, and I have a fond memory of this specifically because I had a stuffed animal when I was a kid of the main character from this movie that I absolutely loved. It was one of my favorites. I remember I had it, for a long time just because I absolutely loved this movie as well. And this was An American Tail, Fievel Goes West. You remember that movie?
I do remember that movie, and I remember it fondly.
Yeah. So, and this is one where I loved this one, more than the first one, because I think the first one was dark, and this second one just seemed like it was a lot friendlier, I think kid friendly than the first one was. But this actually had a pretty interesting cast in here because it has James Stewart in here who played Wiley, and I think he was supposed to be Wyatt Earp. So I think his full name was Wiley Burp. John Cleese was in it. And John Lovitz was in it as well, too. So this actually had a really interesting cast here. And what I thought was interesting about this movie, again, when I did some research on this, is that this was James Stewart's final film before he passed away. John Cleese apparently was offered the role of Cogsworth in Beauty and the Beast, but he turned it down because he wanted to do this movie. And this was actually his debut film for voice acting as well, too, which
impressive.
I mean, Beauty and the Beast definitely, beat it out, but I think John Cleese did a fantastic job in this one that, I think he probably made the right decision for that. This was also another Steven Spielberg film. I don't think he directed this one, but he definitely produced it.
Yeah.
And there was
Don Bluth is the Fievel Goes West. And that's an interesting history too, because Don Bluth was an animator at Disney.
Right.
And then he broke away from them. And the first movie that he made that wasn't Disney was An American Tail, and it beat one of their films at the box office, and it starred a mouse, which was ironic. But yeah, like he was a great animator and film director, and his style is very it's very noticeable.
Right. Yeah, but I don't think Don Bluth was in this movie though. I don't think he was involved with this one.
He was the director. He wasn't the director of
no.
Fievel Goes.
He was for the first movie, but I think he and Steven Spielberg actually had disagreement, something like that, and so he broke off of this. But this was actually directed by Phil Nibelink and Simon Wells.
Oh wow! I learn something every day.
but you're right. Don Bluth did do the first movie though, so he was involved in that. But he broke away and was involved in the second one. So, but there was a scene in this movie where Fievel was riding on the tumbleweed, and you hear the song theme from Rawhide, and it's actually the Blues Brothers version of the song. And apparently that was in there because Spielberg had a cameo in the movie Blues Brothers as well. So I thought that was a really interesting connection that they had. And this was released the same day as Beauty and the Beast.
Oh, really?
Yes. Which was really interesting, thing about it. And I don't know if like at that time, if they knew, like how big either one of those movies were going to be, but we know that, Beauty and the Beast ended up being, one of the best movies of that year. So, but yeah, it came out the same weekend. So, yeah.
What I remember about that movie is watching it, I guess probably not long after it came out, but over the course of the next few years, several times, because I had brothers who were a lot younger than me.
Mm-hmm.
And doing the Wiley Burp impression, and not realizing that was a Jimmy Stewart impression.
Yes.
Because he had such a long and illustrious career in Hollywood, and he was well known for the way that he spoke. And then Wiley Burp was exaggeration of that.
Right.
And it was, these are things that you don't realize as a kid that you learn later in life. Oh, that's the guy from It's a Wonderful Life and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Yep. So, all right. Well, so we both did our top 3 movies of the year. I thought I would just quickly share with everybody what were the top 10 movies in terms of worldwide grossing movies of that year.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll just go ahead and do this real quick. And this is worldwide, so it's not domestic or US. This is, global, box office. So number 1, which is not surprising, is Beauty and the Beast, that earned over $248 million worldwide. Second was Terminator 2 Judgment Day, which earned over $204 million. And it's actually, I don't know if it is to this day, but one of the most successful sequels in any franchise. The third is your favorite, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, which had a little over $165 million. Number 4, Silence of the Lambs, which I thought was actually an older movie, but I guess it came out this year. It earned $130 million.
February of that year. So see, that was one of the first times that like a movie that came out that early in the year would go on to be successful at the award season. Because if you release a movie at that time of the year, a lot of times people have forgotten about it, but it stayed in the public consciousness.
Right. Number 5 was City Slickers at over $124 million. Number 6 was Hook at $119 million. 7 is The Addams Family at $113 million. Number 8 is Sleeping with the Enemy at $101 million. Number 9 is Father of the Bride, which earned about $89 million. And then in 10th was The Naked Gun 2.5, The Smell of Fear at $86 million. So, yeah,
how things have changed. Like if a movie made $100 million today, like it probably wouldn't be like deemed as successful.
Yeah. I mean, for a lot of reasons, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, things have gotten more expensive. So I wonder, adjusted for inflation, what those numbers look like.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure either. So, but yeah,
I want to revisit this topic at some point soon with some guests and talk about our favorite year for movies. Like if you could go back in time and you had to live with the movies that came out of that year, what year would you choose? But since we're talking about 1991, let's wrap it up on this, Sean.
Okay.
If you had to pick one to watch, and you got to watch it at least once a day, every day for the rest of your life, which one would it be?
It's got to be from what?
From the list that we just talked about, from anything that we mentioned, what would it be?
It's got to be Hook, and this is why I love Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, and it's still my favorite over Hook. But I will say 2 things: is one, Hook is still iconic culturally, I think, for us, and has a lot of significance, I think, cinematography, but also for storytelling. And the fact that, Robin Williams is in it and he just did a phenomenal job of playing Peter Pan. I think it's just a really unique and interesting story that I would love to watch that every day. But the second reason is I love Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles too, but I just cannot listen to ninja rap every day.
So I was thinking too, like, do I go pedigree? Go pedigree and say Beauty and the Beast? Because like without a doubt, right now, if you flip that movie on, I could sing every word to every song because it is iconic. But I think after about a week, I would have driven myself insane. So I'll stick with the one that I talked about earlier, and that's the Rocketeer, just because it to me it kind of just harkens back to a different era of movie making and a different. I love those kind of like old school action adventure films, and especially like the B team superhero films, comic book hero films of the of the 90s that we can explore in a future episode. But it's like I said, it's solid gold for me.
Yeah.
So,
oh yeah.
All right. Well, that is a great discussion. I love movies, and I could sit here and talk about movies like all the time. We could start a brand new podcast where we just like revisit movies from our past. But specifically this, yeah. And you know what? Maybe the reason that I got into being a teacher so that I could make sure that I could go to summer movies and stuff like that. Because it's one of the things I look forward to every year. It's like late April like rolls around and there's like the first big release in May coming out, and I'm like, yeah, we get this Marvel film, and then this Harry Potter film, and then this film, and then this franchise, like this, and every year it's like, oh yeah, 2016 is going to be the year for like the best year for movies ever. Yeah. Oh man, 2018 is even better. Wait till 2019. Like it just one after the other, and I always look forward to it. So summer blockbuster season is definitely big, and of course, by the time this episode comes out on the 15th of July. We will have hopefully the biggest summer blockbuster of the season, Thor: Love and Thunder, to talk about. So look for that. But this is where we're going to jump off the nostalgia train today. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Captioned Life Podcast. Sorry, that wraps up another episode of the Captioned Life Podcast. We hope you've enjoyed listening. Please don't forget to smash that subscribe button on whatever major podcast platform you listen to. You can also follow us on social media at Captioned Life. And if you like what we're doing, give us a shout out, tag us in your posts. For more info about us and all of our previous episodes, please visit captionedlife.com. Until next time, we'll see you at the movies.
Ninja.